What is intelligence? Do people with intelligence or intelligent people ask a lot of questions, or do they have answers to a lot of questions? These are important questions related to the nature of intelligence. So, what is intelligence as a human faculty? In this brief presentations, we will just ask questions about the nature of intelligence or the what of intelligence. So, what people have been thinking about, psychologists, philosophers, and thinkers in other fields, what do they think about the nature of intelligence? So, here are some questions that we can ask when we think about the concept of intelligence or the faculty of intelligence. So first, the conceptual and philosophical questions. So we can say that we can categorize questions related to the nature of intelligence into various types. So for example, the conceptual and philosophical questions related to the nature of intelligence. What is intelligence? This is a philosophical or conceptual question. How do different disciplines define and understand intelligence? We will not bother about the answers because there is a variety of answers related to all of these questions, and you can say there are hundreds of ways in which we can answer these questions, or we can think about answering these questions. The second conceptual question: is intelligence a single general ability or a set of multiple intelligences? So, for example, there are thinkers who theorize that there is a single general intelligence, such as Spearman, and there are others who believe that there is a variety of intelligences, or you can say multiple intelligences. And there are others, for example, Sternberg, who argues that there is a triarchic theory of intelligence or concept of intelligence. Can intelligence be fully measured? So another conceptual question. Again, there is a debate. Do IQ tests, for example, accurately reflect a person's intelligent or intellectual capacity or capability, or do they not? Is intelligence innate or learned? So, what is the balance between, for example, nature, the intelligence that we bring with us through our genes or genetics, and nurture, the intelligence or the value that we add to the genetic intelligence through our environment? So, in other words, what is the role, what is the balance between nature, that is genetics, and nurture, that is the environment, in shaping our intelligence? Now, the other set of questions is the biological or genetic questions related to the nature of intelligence. So, what role do genes play in determining intelligence? So, are there specific genes linked to higher intelligence or higher cognitive ability? So, are there families, for example, or lineages where the intelligence is transferred from generation to generation? The next question in this category is: how does the brain structure and function relate to intelligence? In other words, which areas of the brain are most active in intelligent people, or people who exhibit intelligent behavior in comparison to others? Does nutrition or prenatal environment influence intelligence? In other words, how early in life do such biological factors start to matter in terms of increasing or decreasing or influencing our intelligence? The next category of questions is related to the cognitive and psychological category of questions. So, for example, how is intelligence related to memory, attention, and problem solving? Is a better memory capacity something that is related to higher intelligence? Is it is better attention span, for example, leads to higher intelligence, or is it something that does not play its role in higher problem solving skills? So in other words, is intelligence a composite of multiple cognitive abilities? The other question related to the cognitive and psychological questions is, how stable is intelligence across the lifespan? So in other words, does intelligence increase, or does it decrease, or does it remain constant throughout our age? You need to think about it, and you can study theories related to and research related to these questions. The next important question is, how do, for example, motivation, which is like a psychological concept, and emotional influence, or emotions influence the expression of our intelligence? In other words, in what ways motivation and emotion impact the level or type of intelligence that we have? So can a person with high intelligence underperform due to low motivation or emotional distress? So in many cases, we can experience such things, and we can observe such things where intelligent people in emotional situations, or where they are high on emotions, can have different cognitive or intellectual behaviors or responses in comparison to situations where less emotions are involved. Now, how do we actually measure and assess intelligence? So, for example, what are the limitations of the standard IQ tests? Psychologists and behaviorists, scientists have an interest in measuring intelligence. So how do we actually measure intelligence? And what are the limitations of standard intelligence tests or IQ tests? Do they capture creativity, for example, social intelligence, or practical skills? Or do they focus on some other skills while they are measuring intelligence, or they're trying to measure intelligence? How do cultural and language differences affect intelligence testing? Again, tests are generally prepared by people living in particular culture. So, the universal applications of those tests or those measures, again, is a question that we need to ask. So are intelligence tests culturally biased, or are they, you can say, unbiased? The next question is, can intelligence be improved or trained? So again, what role do, for example, cognitive training or education and you can say exposure to particular environment play in enhancing intelligence or impacting intelligence in one way or another way? So another set of intelligence, of questions related to the concept of intelligence is educational. We can group that as educational or developmental questions. So for example, how should schools nurture different types of intelligence? If intelligence is an important concept for education or for educational institutions, for students and teachers, how should schools nurture different types of intelligence? For example, you can say cognitive intelligence, or you can say the concept of multiple intelligences, emotional intelligence, and so on. Are our education systems built for only a narrow form of intelligence, such as, for example, memory-based intelligence or cognitive intelligence, or is it something that also deals with other forms of intelligence, perhaps more important forms of intelligence, such as emotional intelligence or psychological intelligence? What role does early childhood education play in the intellectual development of, for example, students? Can enriched environments enhance cognitive outcomes, or is that not the case? How do intelligence beliefs, such as the fixed versus growth mindset? So there are beliefs that intelligence is fixed. There are other theories which say that intelligence can be enhanced. So how do those intelligence beliefs impact or affect the process of learning in educational context? Does, for example, believing intelligence is malleable or changeable or flexible, we can enhance it, or it could decrease with certain in certain types of environments? What is it? Can these lead to better academic performance, or is that not the case? Then the other category of questions related to intelligence is the social, ethical, and political questions. So, for example, how does intelligence affect social mobility and life opportunities? So, are there people with particular types of intelligence who have better opportunities, or who are better placed to have opportunities for social mobility, for higher economic status, and for making use of life opportunities in comparison to others who do not have that kind of intelligence? Do IQ scores determine access to resources and privileges? Is it ethical to use intelligence testing in education, for example, in education, employment, or immigration, for example? Where should we draw the line? These are social, ethical, and political questions related to intelligence. How do stereotypes and biases affect the perceptions of intelligence? That, for example, you can say certain groups of people, certain races, people from certain geographical locations, should those be considered as having the ability to have more intelligence or better intelligence in comparison to others? So in other words, are certain groups unfairly labeled as more or less intelligent? And lastly, what are the societal consequences? What are the societal consequences of emphasizing intelligence, for example, over other human traits? So, for example, does it lead to elitism if we consider certain people more intelligent than others, and so you can say having the privilege, so should they have a privileged position in comparison to others? Can this also lead to exclusion, for example, or neglect of other valuable abilities which do not come under the faculty of intelligence? These are questions related to the nature of intelligence. These are important questions, but there are, you can say, thousands of questions that we can ask about the nature of intelligence, the role of intelligence, the value of intelligence, and so on. And now we need to think about the various ways, or you can say the many ways in which we can answer these questions.